Taxi!
Where to, mate?
Hello, mate. 55 Tufton Street, please.
55 Tufton Street, SW1. Yep, I know it well. Hop in, sir. This is A Nation of Taxpayers, a weekly podcast from the Taxpayers Alliance.
1 year of Sir Keir Starmer in 10 Downing Street. That is the theme of this week's episode of A Nation of Taxpayers. I'm your host, Duncan Barkes. Alongside me this week, we have Darwin Friend from the TPA. Hello, Darwin.
Hello, Duncan.
And Elliot Keck once again. Hello.
Hello, Duncan.
Well, lots of stuff to talk about, but not just us talking about stuff. We thought we'd go out and about beyond the TPA podcast studio to the glorious seaside town of Worthing in West Sussex and talk to people about Keir Starmer and his first year of government. Why did we choose Worthing? Very simply, Worthing used to have 2 Conservative MPs. As of July of 2024, they now have 2 Labour MPs. And the council in Worthing had always been true blue. Up until a few years ago, it's now a Labour council. So we packed our bucket and spade and we went to the promenade in Worthing and asked people about their views on the first year of Keir Starmer in Downing Street. And this is what we found out.
I think they've done the complete opposite of what I would have expected them to do, and that is to perhaps impose more taxes on the wealthy people instead of penalising the older and more unfortunate people in society, which seems to be the path they're going down, and I just don't understand it.
Don't you see, though, there's an argument that's been made about the need for welfare reform with the welfare bill getting so high? Do you not think that maybe with the mess that the last government left regarding the economy, that Labour has had to come in and basically do some pretty tough and hard stuff that maybe they instinctively don't want to do, but they have to do it because the finances are that bad?
Well, yes, I don't think anybody knew how bad it was until Labour got in. How true the deficit was, I don't know, because that's obviously been disputed like most things in politics. But I think there's always an element with any government that they blame the one before. I found it very difficult to know which party to vote for. And I was not of the opinion that the Conservatives were the right party anymore. I have been a Conservative voter, but when I look at some of the things they've done with HS2 and that in particular and other things and their foreign policies, I didn't go that way this time. Let's put it that way.
That's very interesting. So if you didn't go that way this time, what do you make of the new Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, and how do you think she's been performing ever since she got into...
Well, I haven't heard much about her, really, to be honest with you. It's easy to sit on the front benches and criticise the government. That's all they seem to do. They seem to be just criticising each other rather than getting on and doing a proper job for the benefit of all the people that voted them in.
Well, people maybe not like Keir Starmer and they're not hearing from Kemi Badenoch, but there's one person they're certainly hearing a lot from, and you know what I'm going to say, it's Nigel Farage, of course. I mean, Reform's now polling at almost 30% of the polls these days. Do you have any thoughts on Reform UK and Nigel Farage? Do you think there's potential in a few years of the time for them to be in government, or is it just going to flounder out?
At the moment, it would frighten me to death if Farage got anywhere near anything to do with politics. Unfortunately, he's already got his foot in the door. How much of that is down to the poor performance of the Conservatives and the current performance of the Labour Party, I don't know.
Well, I feel there used to be a divide. Conservatives were generally for the well-off, the people that already live a life with less worries, and Labour used to potentially fight for the people that were worst off. But there doesn't seem to be anything that separates them now, and I can't say I dislike anyone more than another now. It just feels like no matter if it's Labour or Tory or who I used to have faith in the Green Party, but I find they've gone way off kilt. They are now slightly extreme, whereas some of what they wanted was great and really beneficial, but they've just taken it that step further where most normal people can't get on board with it. So it's nice to just be able to have some middle ground where you could find some understanding, but you either have Labour and Tory, which seem to disappoint us all, or you have parties that used to show promise, like the Green Party, that are just like an extreme party now. And we love animals, we're vegan, so Green Party used to be great for the climate, the environment, but now they want to potentially, I work for an airline, I work for EasyJet, they want to have less flights, less airlines, less companies. I'd be jobless. So it's like, okay, where's the middle ground in this?
Yeah. And a final question,
Yep.
do you have a view on Reform UK or Nigel Farage?
He's a douchebag. Yeah, no, yeah. I could not live with myself if I gave that bloke the time of day. So, yeah.
I think it's been a disaster for them. I would never vote Labour regardless, but I think they've sold the country down the river, and it's just getting worse and worse.
When you say it's getting worse, what's the one key issue for you?
Immigration.
Yeah.
That is the key issue. And also as a pensioner, I'm quite disgusted the way we've been treated.
And if I can ask you, putting Keir Starmer to one side, what do you make of some of the other political parties? The Conservatives, for example?
Conservatives need to do a lot of homework to get back where they were. Nigel Farage, I think, is the only person that's got the ability at this present time to run this country the way that a British and English person wants it to be run. But then that's from an older person's point of view. I mean, I know it can never go back to the Britain like we were, and I'm all for progress, and I think Nigel Farage would do a good job.
I was very happy when Labour came into power and got rid of the Conservatives. Wasn't ever overly impressed with Keir Starmer from the beginning, but actually just so relieved that we'd got rid of, and especially living here in Worthing, being able to have 2 Labour MPs for the first time is amazing. And we'd moved down not that long ago from London, and it's always a bit this is maybe Toryville, but actually that's a really good sign for the sort of place I want to live in, the sort of people I want to live around, and the sort of community I want to live in, and the priorities of the local government and all of that stuff. But not overly impressed with the government as a whole. I think, they've got a huge majority and they haven't actually been able to... My hope was that when they came into power, they would then do more radical things, because I feel like they haven't really got a radical agenda or a radical narrative that they're trying to push.
The jury's out because things haven't got potentially any better. I've got sick of hearing him go on about, the 22 billion deficit or whatever. You can't use that excuse for too much longer.
Yeah.
So we've got to see some action, haven't we?
Yeah. What would you like to see action on? You said that Labour's just using a lot of excuses. What do you think they should actually start doing rather than using excuses for things? What should they actually do?
Why do you want me to start?
Wherever you want to start.
Okay, let's start. Anything. Let's start with immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah. We said we'd stop the boats and go and probably pay the French more money and bump up security. That didn't work. He's just had a backtrack now on welfare.
Yeah.
That's got to be sorted out, because if you're welfare, you actually sorted, you're gilt-edged in this country. That's not for everybody, I know, but we've got neighbours. We're having to sell our house because we worked all our life, and the guy next door, he can stay there quite comfortably because he's got all the benefits. Top pip, despite the fact that he can build a fence, walk his dog, ride his motorbike. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I know there's genuine people out there, but there's too many people that aren't.
The thing is, when he got in during the election, he had fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019, was it? And actually, I think that kind of says it all, really.
And just so I'm clear, are you a local Worthing person?
Yes.
You are. So Worthing, up until July of last year, had two Conservative
MPs.
Yes. And then it went to 2 Labour MPs.
Yes.
And your council, of course, used to be Conservative.
Yes.
And a couple of years ago, it went Labour.
Yes.
Have you noticed any changes locally as opposed to nationally?
Yes, I have actually. Just only things like the bin collection, for one, but we live in apartments and the bins aren't collected for 2 weeks, which in the summer when there's 5 apartments is not good. You cannot contact them because there's just an email and you don't get an email back. Just small things. Probably just that at the moment. But I kind of think, I'm not a Conservative voter, but I thought that the Conservative Council was okay, actually. We've lived here for 8 years. But, yeah.
I think they're fairly confused about where they think they're going, and there's been a lot of backtracking on all sorts of things, and the latest one being sort of social care, and that seems to be the pattern, really. And Rachel Reeves is doing the same thing with the economy. So disappointed, I think, really, for where they're at.
I'll be honest, I did vote for Labour. I do feel a bit disappointed in how they have sort of turned into Tory light, and yeah, I think they've done a lot of things that you maybe wouldn't have anticipated Labour doing, especially when it comes to benefit cuts. Keeping the two-child benefit limit cap in place. So things like that are not kind of your typical, in my opinion, not your typical Labour kind of what's the word? But not been massively impressed. I'll be totally honest.
Right then, chaps, a lot of interesting stuff there. Initial reactions from what we heard.
Firstly, I mean, is the reason you went to Worthing really because it's local to you, Duncan, and nothing to do with its political makeup?
Not true at all. I think politically it's a very interesting case study. But it is just along the coast from where I live in Chichester, which also had a change of MP. It went from Conservative to Lib Dem. So we are seeing some shifts. But it's fair to say that Worthing is not a typical seaside town.
No, and in fairness, even if it was based on your own convenience, the range of voices that you got does demonstrate it was the right place to go, because you really had the full gamut of the political spectrum, and really everybody was extremely dissatisfied and discontented with our political leaders and with the political leadership that they've demonstrated, possibly with the exception of the individual that is obviously very keen on Farage, but by definition, they're therefore not keen on everyone else. And I think it really demonstrates how broken our politics has been for a long time. And I think one of the ways in which it's so broken and one of the root causes is because so much of polling and political leadership is now done based on the polls.
Yeah.
And the simple reality is the public, they vote for change, and they may have a rough idea what they mean when they say they want change and what sort of general direction they want to see the country go in as a result of that change. But it's really up to political leaders to actually communicate a clear governing philosophy to them, and the successful governments of the past have done that. Blair had his third way.
Yeah.
I don't think that may have been informed by polling, but that was ultimately from his own vision for what he thought the country needed. Thatcher had free markets and monetarism and that assortment of policies. Wilson had his, the white heat of scientific progress. Attlee had, rebuilding the country in a socialist. To sort of summarise, all of these governments had a very clear governing philosophy and agenda, which they then sold to the public. Keir Starmer had a sort of assortment of policies that he felt might be popular according to polling that takes place at any one moment, but no agenda, no real philosophy, nothing coherent, and as a result, it's all gone horribly wrong.
A lack of vision,
lack of vision,
maybe a lack of pure ideology.
Yeah.
And actually, we in the past we've talked about Thatcherism, Blairism. We don't know what Starmerism is, do we? Darwin, your thoughts on what you just heard?
Yeah, I think it actually fits well into the kind of the national picture of how people are feeling, which is a general dissatisfaction with how the government's performing, but not just the government, but as Elliot mentioned, pretty much all political parties and all leaders at the minute. There's a couple of exceptions, for example, for Nigel Farage, but outside of that, everyone seems to be, down in Worthing, not very happy with how things are going, and that matches to what the current kind of popularity figures are for Keir Starmer as well. I did a quick look before we kind of recorded this podcast, and I saw Starmer's popularity now, just a year into office, is now minus 50.
Yeah.
Now, that's the worst of any Prime Minister after, I believe, their first year in office, especially after coming from opposition as well, because quite often opposition leaders are elected because they are popular and they're a lot better and they've got a clearer vision for how they see the country now that they've actually defeated the previous government. But minus 50 for Starmer, as I say. Tony Blair in the same period, he was plus 30 after his first year. Even David Cameron, amidst kind of the global financial crisis and the cuts that he was having to make then, he had minus 5. So this is an anomaly for Starmer, and like I said, I think unless the public start to see some positive results for what the government's actually achieving, then I think his future could be in doubt.
I was struck by, the baseline from all of those people, whether or not they voted Labour or not, is dissatisfaction with Starmer. Those who were prepared to, I was going to say admit, but those who told us quite openly they voted for Labour seemed to be disappointed. So even his core vote are not impressed with the first 12 months. And I also was struck by the lady and her friend, and they'd lived in Worthing for 8 years, and their thoughts on the Labour Council, effectively saying that actually when it was a Tory council, they thought it was better because she was complaining about her bin collections. So I was struck by all of that. Is it too late? Is it too late? Is it possible, do you think, for Starmer to turn things around this early on into his premiership?
I don't think it is, because if you've had 5 years or 4 years as leader of the opposition and 14 years in opposition and you still have no idea what your governing agenda should be or what your governing philosophy is, you can't create it now. Opposition is the time to do that. You don't have any time in government. You're dealing with crisis after crisis, decision after decision. You don't have time to step back. And the first... the first guy's answer was really interesting. He spoke about how he thought, Labour government might want to focus more on taxing the wealthy rather than go after those on benefits or winter fuel payments or whatever. And the simple reality is we already tax the top 1% to an extraordinary amount. 30% of income tax receipts comes from the top 1%. That's more than ever in UK history. The UK tax system is essentially, or the UK fiscal system is essentially a massive range of hugely expensive public services paid for by the top 1% and largely paid for by the top 1%. But the reason why people like that are giving that response to you is because no one's communicated this to them.
No.
Keir Starmer has really pretended that we can have this land of milk and honey where we can massively increase spending in public services, we can massively reform public services, we don't need to raise any taxes. And if we do raise taxes, we can, do some stuff on non-doms and VAT on private school. There has not been a politician recently, and certainly not Keir Starmer, that has actually been honest with the public about what the trade-offs are.
Yeah, and your view there is echoed by the bloke we heard from at the end of that, who was just like, well, I thought he'd be spending more money on this. And it was TPA's Will Yarwood who challenged him a little bit on it as well. And, it's kind of interesting that message that we can't just carry on spending, that is not properly being challenged. Obviously we do what we can here at the TPA, but there is this mindset now, Darwin, that, let's just turn on the taps and give everybody what they want.
Well, you're seeing it today and much of last week as well when we're talking about the welfare bill they're trying to push through as well at the minute. Kind of, you're hearing Labour MP after Labour MP say, no, don't worry about how much it actually costs and the economy and anything. Let's focus on the end point and kind of the service we want to deliver. Well, if you're not thinking about how much things cost and how the general economy is doing before you factor in what you can then spend that money on, then you're going to end up in the situation we're in, where we've got debt rocketing, spending rising, and taxes having to go up as a result as well. And ultimately, that's not going to change. We're going to see in the autumn budget, they're going to have to raise at least $4 billion already just to make up for the welfare U-turn they've currently done, and also the winter fuel U-turn they did earlier as well. And that's before they come into any more spending commitments, which they're no doubt going to do close to that time.
And there was a chap on our little montage there who was saying he's going to have to move house because his next door neighbour is on, I think he said, top rate PIP, he said, despite being able to put up a fence, ride a motorbike, etc., etc. It's beginning to cut through, isn't it? I think that it's almost like, here comes that phrase again, the two-tier Britain that exists. We talked about two-tier justice, we talked about two-tier policing. There are kind of like, there's two-tier people, isn't there? Those who are actually putting into the system and are getting a bit fed up of it, and those who, in some cases, as that man suggested, are taking out the system and are quite literally taking the mick.
Well, I think that's the thing. Us in Westminster, I don't just say us at the TPA, but people across Westminster, you can sometimes get bogged down on these things and sort of like, you're looking at these figures and things that are actually happening on the ground through a spreadsheet in terms of total numbers of people that, for example, are claiming benefits, for example. But the thing is, with the people you've spoken to, they're seeing it in real life, in live time, happening to them in their lives. And when you're seeing people who are not working as hard as you, or not even working at all sometimes, actually having a better lifestyle than you're able to afford, despite the fact that you're going out every single day, working a job, working hard in return for that paycheck, it is fundamentally unfair on those people. It's not just a feeling that they should feel. It is the case that they should feel that way, because it is unfair that people that are going away, working hard, paying their tax to the government at record levels, as we constantly highlight here, it's not fair that they should have a harder time for it than those people who, for whatever reason, are relying on the benefit system.
Elliot, let's dig a bit deeper into the first year of Starmer's premiership. Where, in your view, did it start to go wrong?
Before the election. I mean, it really was that simple, because before the election, Starmer and Reeves promised not to raise VAT, national insurance and income tax. Obviously, we, the Taxpayers Alliance, absolutely support that intention. We don't think you should be raising any taxes at the moment. We think you should be cutting taxes very significantly. However, you can't say that to the public. You can't say you're not going to have to pay a penny more and then come in and decide to also spend tens of billions of pounds more. Because as we've seen, what they've tried to do is they've tried to raise a little bit from non-doms, VAT on private school. It's not raising any money. It's not raising any money at all, because the wealthy are leaving, and they're leaving in droves. Or they're changing their economic decision-making. So as a result, you have this fundamental dishonesty at the heart of their whole fiscal policy, which is that we can spend a lot more, and we can just squeeze the wealthy to get that extra cash, or maybe cut little bits, here and there from particular groups, benefit cuts, winter fuel. None of it's enough. And there was a fundamental dishonesty at the heart of their whole election campaign that they have yet to been able to solve, because they are still not able to come out to the public and say, do you know what? We lied to you. We lied through our teeth. We're sorry, but we're going to have to hold our hands up now and tell you that if you want all the things that we're trying to pay for, you're going to have to start paying more money. And I think in particular, again, it's you look at things that Labour voters actually care about that actually make people worse. You could see a situation where you say, okay, we're going to raise income tax a bit, but as a result, we're going to invest loads more in police. We're going to invest loads more in prison places. We're going to tackle antisocial behaviour. We're going to stop fare dodgers. We're going to clean up graffiti quickly. We're going to stop small boats. All things that actually just make people's lives a little bit better and make the streets a bit nicer. And, that could be actually a successful governing philosophy that broadly leans left, is about, taking more in tax in order to essentially provide for a stronger state that cleans the country up a little bit quicker. But again, they just never really thought about this, because essentially their view is that it's just all about the NHS.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the people we spoke to, not one person mentioned the NHS. I was also surprised that nobody mentioned Brexit. So maybe we've actually finally started to move on from talking about something that happened almost, the beginnings of it happened almost a decade ago. I mean, I'm struck with Starmer and co, just how bad they are at politics, aside from the policies and stuff, just how bad they are at the political game. Why do you think that is, Darwin?
I think because they're inherently not good at communicating, and they don't know how to communicate with real people. I mean, most of the people that they want to communicate to are within kind of the Westminster London boundaries. Yeah. The people that are outside of those areas, I don't think they have any idea of how to talk to them at all. And so that's why then they fold, as they have done on this welfare bill, because as soon as they get a little bit of pushback from people actually saying, hang on, no, maybe people don't want this, they go, maybe I don't actually understand people very well. Forget the principles that I might want to govern by. I'm just going to do whatever these people say instead. I mean, Elliot, what do you think about that communication style? I mean, you're the comms guy in the TPA, so why do you think they're struggling to get it over to people what they're trying to do?
Yeah, they have made some very bizarre decisions, and it comes back to the fact that they've forgotten why people vote for a Labour government. And so, the most interesting example was a winter fuel payment, right? I mean, the winter fuel payment, they said that they were cutting in order to fill the £22 billion black hole. Labour voters don't care about fiscal black holes. Labour voters vote for a Labour government for them to spend a load more money, right? Spend a load more money, borrow a bit more if you need to. And yet Labour came in, one of the first things they did was cut winter fuel payments. And they framed it as in order to fill the fiscal black hole. They didn't frame it to, we're going to cut winter fuel payments to pay nurses more, and that money's going straight into nurses' pockets. Yeah. And then, when the Conservatives or whoever attacks them for cutting winter fuel payments, you can at least say, okay, where are you going to get the money for extra nurses? Where are you going to get the money to give nurses a pay rise? Instead, it was to fill this fiscal black hole, which, as any economist that's looked into it knows, is broadly nonsense. It's probably not even half of that, and a lot of it would have disappeared during normal spending pressures. So the communications are very weird, because again, I don't think they really know why they want to be in power. They thought that the fiscal black hole messaging would be an effective one that would appeal to the centre ground, and that's not actually how politics works. This idea of there being a centre ground, it's mostly mythical. Most people actually have a mixture of right-wing and left-wing views that may then look centrist as a result of it, but actually each individual view tends to leans more distinctly left-wing or more distinctly right-wing. And so if you then offer this policy agenda that tries to just be an incoherent mixed middle on everything, you appeal to nobody.
I just want to jump in as well, Duncan. I think it goes back to what Elliot said earlier as well, is that they didn't lay the groundwork for what they were going to do when they actually came into government, because they didn't know what they wanted to do when they came in. I think part of the reason why, for example, David Cameron, after his first year, is significantly seemingly more popular, or less unpopular anyway, than Starmer is right now, is because he didn't go into the 2010 general election saying, we're going to have a land of milk and honey. No. He was saying, no, we're actually going to have to do some tough decisions to get us out of the fiscal hole that we're in. The issue with Labour is what they've done is they've decided to have that Ming-Vage strategy of not saying anything during the general election really about what they wanted to do. They've then come up with a supposed 22 billion black hole. I think the OBR put it down at 9 billion after they looked at it, to try and make up for some difficult decisions that they wanted to do back in the autumn and early after they were elected. And now they're running into the problem of people aren't very happy about that. And as Elliot said, they vote for a Labour government because not only do they want to see more spending, but they want to see public services get better. And the thing is, they're not getting either of those right now. They're getting more spending on certain things, but nothing's actually getting better in return for that. And I think people are fundamentally quite transactional about things. They don't mind giving a bit more if they're going to get a bit more in return for that. But the thing is, we're dishing out billions of pounds more for public services, but where are we seeing the improvement in them? We're just not right now.
There's that. There's no tangible results coming through that people can go, I don't mind paying because I'm seeing this. But also, Elliot, going back to what you said, those of us who have worked in political comms in the past, the messaging is just pretty much, if not shocking, non-existent. I mean, I think what we could do in the future is ask people what they think Labour stands for, and I think we get about 55 different answers, because there's no coherent messaging going on.
Yeah, and the welfare vote, which is sort of bubbling away as we speak. In fact, we're expecting a vote in the coming hours, and we'll obviously know the results by the time we release this podcast, is the ultimate example of this. The whole case that Labour made about cutting welfare spending, and as Darwin will probably point out, we're not cutting welfare spending, we're slightly reducing the increase in the size of welfare spending. PIP and disability benefits are heading to £100 billion by the end of the decade. The Labour proposal is for them to head to sort of £95 billion. But when they made that case, they made the fiscal case. They said, we cannot afford these disability benefits, so we have to cut them. Fine. I personally agree with that line. I think a country should only pay and spend money on what it can actually afford. Even if there's other nice things that you'd like in an ideal world, this is not an ideal world. This is the real adult world. We're not children. We can't just have whatever we want all the time. So I agree with that argument. But Labour MPs are not going to agree with that argument. No. Labour voters are not going to agree with that argument because, again, fiscally, they live generally in imagination land. And that's, Tories have their own problems, people on the right have their own problems, where they live in slightly unreal places. But that's the problem with the left. You could have always made the moral case, right? Labour is called Labour. It's supposed to be a party of workers. So if we have millions and millions and millions of people exploiting a benefit system that is at least in part funded by working class people who are actually in work, putting in 40, 50 hours a week, working 2 jobs, taking on extra shifts instead of taking annual leave, whatever it is, there are extremely hardworking people that are paying for the benefits of people with, as the TPA have revealed this week, eczema, acne, alcohol misuse, drug misuse, conditions which are literally called factitious disorders, which mean that you habitually make up being ill, so you're not actually ill, you habitually make it up. And there are people that are getting benefits for that. And they could have made that case. That would have been a distinctly left-wing case that still would have achieved the necessary fiscal changes, but they never made it because, again, they don't actually know why they're in politics.
No, I mean, I've concluded over the last couple of days, and particularly seeing some of your research, I do think unless someone gets a grip on where we are of our benefit system, it will bankrupt this nation. I mean, no doubt about it. That 100 billion quid by the end of this decade is a shocking figure to have to deal with. Secondly, the other thing I concluded, listening to various Labour MPs, some of whom are new, first year in government, they just don't have any understanding of the real world. And you look into their backgrounds, a lot of them have come from the charity sector, right? This is going to sound harsh, and I mean it to sound harsh. They're not going out to graft, they're operating, they're using somebody else's money. It's not money they've had to generate. And now I find myself thinking, well, if our benefits bill is going to increase, for example, there is partly a solution to pay for it, which is, if we get growth in this country and the private sector starts to function in the way that all of us here would like to see it function, that's more money into the government's coffers. But then, of course, we've got the Employment Rights Bill, we've got the budget that Reeves did recently that just hammers UK business. I just don't see where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, and let's think back to what they were saying before, and as they got elected as well. They said, we're going to deliver nothing less than a national renewal, and that they're going to fix the foundations and make people better off. Well, the thing is, the way they want to try and make people better off is through the state, rather than actually taking the state away a little bit and letting people make themselves better off through their own ingenuity and innovation. But the thing is, they fundamentally believe, despite the fact that they don't have any real agenda for what they want to do, deep down, what Starmer and Reeves believe is that the state will make everything better for everyone in this country. And ultimately, they fail to remember that when the state has been overburdensome, it's not delivered that. It's delivered an inefficient state and a state where people think that they can rely on the government, and when the government runs out of money, who are people going to rely on then?
Yeah, you've TPA have got a bit of research out, 1 year as Starmer. Just give us some of the highlights, Darwin.
Yeah, sure. So what my team's produced is kind of a little briefing note to celebrate or commiserate the Starmer's first year in office. What we've found is we've compared him with all the other 21st century prime ministers, going back to Tony Blair, and we've come up with some metrics and figured he's 6 out of 7, so he's penultimate last, shall we say. And when we compare him over economic growth metrics, how the debt's changed, unemployment, inflation, and also business confidence as well, he comes 6 out of 7. I mean, when we look at economic growth on its own, the only 2 people that have actually done worse in their first year as prime minister are Rishi Sunak, who inherited a pretty bad situation, shall we say, and then Boris Johnson as well. And those figures are obviously partly impacted by the beginnings of the COVID pandemic as well. So like I said, it's a pretty poor showing for him across all of these metrics. And again, I think what we're seeing, to be fair to him, is generally prime ministers that have come into office after the 2000s, further away from the year 2000, have seen worse results. But also we're seeing more crises in these periods as well. And what Starmer's now got is 4 years where, in theory, we're not expecting any crisis to occur necessarily, and him to actually kick on from this. And hopefully it is only a bad first year, but certainly from what we're seeing at the minute from him and the rest of the government, it's looking like the next 4 years aren't going to produce much better either. Elliot,
do you think he's going to survive? Or how long do you think he's got as Prime Minister? Because we know with the benefits vote, there was initially a rebellion of around 120 to 130 MPs. That has been reduced. I mean, that then was being looked at initially as a vote of no confidence in him. Do you think he's got what it takes to survive for the next 4 years?
I think he'll probably get close to the next election, but I think he'll be gone for the next election. He's got, his authority is absolutely shot. I don't think we can exaggerate just how bad the last couple of weeks have been. Yeah. He proposed the most minor of changes to the welfare system. Yeah. The most minor changes to a welfare system that was exploding out of control, and yet he's had to essentially completely water it all down. He does have a couple of cards he can play, but they're not very good ones. I think he'll sack Rachel Reeves. I think she'll increase one of the big 3 taxes. So it was her explicit decision during the election campaign to promise not to do that. Yeah. I think she's going to be forced into doing it. He can then get rid of her. I think he could always get rid of Morgan McSweeney, who is driving a lot of the more centrist agenda that actually, you get some good bits and pieces, but which the left of his party despises. And that will help, but that will only further actually diminish his authority in the long term. And it will help in the short term. It will get people off his back. And then I think it gets to before the general election and either he or his party removes him. But his authority is completely gone. If he couldn't even make minor fiscal policy changes to stuff like winter fuel and to PIP, despite the fact that public spending is basically at a record high, despite the fact that taxes are heading for a record high, despite the fact that benefits are heading for a record high, if he's not even able to convince his MPs to make minor changes, he's not fit for office. And neither are his MP colleagues, to be fair, but it's easier to get rid of him than it is to get rid of 414 colleagues before the next election.
His issue is that the 2 people at the top of the government are lame ducks, effectively, himself and the Chancellor as well. And what we're seeing now is, as you mentioned earlier, kind of reports about Morgan McSweeney being the fault. And you'll hear this for a while now, really. Every single decision where he has to U-turn on it, which is becoming an increasing amount, it's going to be, it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. It's not the Prime Minister's fault. But eventually, time's going to catch up with them, and he will be the one to blame, and Labour MPs will come after him. So I agree with Elliot. I don't see him lasting this full Parliament, which, when you think about it, is astonishing. Like, this size of his majority, historic mandate he's been given, a historic opportunity to even turn around the fortunes of this country and the finances that it's currently got. But again, he's just decided to throw it away through, and it's his choice at the end of the day.
Yeah.
This is all his choice. He's the top of the government.
Yeah.
He's the one that has to set the message for everyone else to work off, and he's decided not to set one at all, which allows others to then control the narrative, really, about it.
Gentlemen, it's been great. Thank you for your time.
Just a reminder, if you have any thoughts on the first year of Keir Starmer's government, please send us an email. The email address is podcast@taxpayersalliance.com. That's podcast@taxpayersalliance.com. You can find A Nation of Taxpayers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and on YouTube. Please do us a favour and spread the word to other people who might enjoy this kind of podcast. Until next time, thank you for listening.